What would you do if your HOA tried to fine you for a rule you never agreed to? Worse, what if they claimed authority over your home when you had legal proof that they didn't? Ethan Walker had always dreamed of owning a home where he could finally relax without interference. After years of dealing with cramped apartments, thin walls, and noisy city life, he found the perfect place, a quiet suburban house with a backyard pool and, best of all, zero HOA involvement. The previous owner had opted out years ago, meaning Ethan was free from the power-hungry suburban dictators that so many homeowners dreaded. Or at least, that's what he thought. The first sign of trouble arrived on a humid Monday morning. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his coffee ritual, and when he opened it, he was met with a smug-looking older man in a tailored suit, holding a clipboard like a weapon. Gerald Whitmore, the man introduced himself. "I'm the head of the Maplewood HOA. Ethan frowned. "That's nice. What can I do for you?" Gerald didn't waste time with pleasantries. He extended a formal-looking notice. "This property is in violation of community guidelines. Your pool is unauthorized and must be drained immediately." Ethan barely stopped himself from laughing. "I think you've got the wrong house. I'm not in the HOA." Gerald's smile didn't falter. It was the kind of smile that suggested he knew something Ethan didn't. "There have been some updates to the neighborhood bylaws," he said smoothly. "I suggest you read through them carefully." Ethan's amusement disappeared. "I don't need to. I have legal documents stating my home isn't under HOA jurisdiction." He flipped through the notice, scanning for any real legal threats. "So, I'll be keeping my pool." Gerald tilted his head slightly. "You may want to rethink that." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing in his doorway, staring at the paper in his hand. The whole encounter felt off, too confident, too rehearsed, like Gerald had done this before and expected no resistance. Ethan brushed it off. If Gerald thought he could intimidate him, he had another thing coming. But when a second letter arrived the next day, this time with a fine of $100 per day, he started to realize this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was the opening move in a war. That was exactly what happened to Ethan Walker. For years, he had dreamed of owning a peaceful home where he could escape the chaos of the city, and when he found the house in Maplewood, it felt perfect. A quiet suburban street, a spacious yard, and best of all, no HOA, the previous owner had opted out years ago, which meant Ethan was free from the endless, nitpicky rules that turned homeowners into prisoners of their own property. Or so he thought. The first sign of trouble arrived on a humid Monday morning. Ethan was enjoying his coffee when a sharp knock interrupted his routine. On the porch stood Gerald Whitmore, a man in a perfectly pressed suit, holding a clipboard and wearing a smug expression that radiated unchecked authority. Without so much as a greeting, he extended an official-looking notice. "This property is in violation of community guidelines," Gerald said, his voice as crisp as his suit. "Your pool is unauthorized and must be drained immediately." Ethan frowned, scanning the document. "I think you have the wrong house. I'm not part of the HOA." Gerald's smile never wavered. "There have been some updates to the neighborhood bylaws. I suggest you read through them carefully." Ethan wasn't amused. "I don't need to. I have legal documents stating my home isn't under HOA jurisdiction." Gerald tilted his head, eyes glinting with something that looked almost like amusement. "You may want to rethink that." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing in his doorway, gripping the notice in his hand. At first, Ethan brushed it off as an overreach, an HOA president too eager to exert control over a house that wasn't his concern. But then, the next day, another letter arrived. This time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a fine. $100 per day until the pool was drained. Ethan ignored it. By the following evening, someone had trespassed onto his property and chained the pool gate shut. That was when Ethan realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. At first, Ethan thought the threats and fines were just an intimidation tactic, one he could easily dismiss. After all, the HOA had no legal authority over his home. He had the original deed, the exemption documents, and the assurance that the homeowners association had no claim over his property. But Gerald Whitmore wasn't the kind of man who accepted resistance. The next morning, Ethan stepped outside to find his mailbox stuffed with yet another HOA notice, only this time, the fine had doubled, $200 per day ***, and the letter included a veiled threat: failure to comply may result in legal action, property liens, or additional enforcement measures. Ethan clenched his jaw and tossed the letter aside. Let them try. But they didn't just try. A few days later, a city utility truck parked in front of his house. A man in a neon vest approached him with a clipboard. "Sir, we received a complaint from the HOA about unauthorized water use," the worker explained. "They claim your pool is violating water conservation laws. We've been instructed to shut off service until the matter is resolved." Ethan blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." The worker shrugged. "You'll have to take it up with the HOA." Now it wasn't just about fines and paperwork. The HOA was actively cutting off his utilities. Furious, Ethan walked to his neighbor's house, an elderly man named Franklin Hayes, who had lived in Maplewood for decades. Franklin had watched everything unfold with a knowing look in his eyes, and when Ethan approached, he shook his head. "You're fighting a battle most of us gave up on years ago," Franklin said in a low voice. "These people, they don't play fair." Ethan crossed his arms. "I'm not even in their HOA. They have no legal right over my property." Franklin chuckled darkly. "Son, legal has nothing to do with it. They'll twist the system however they need to." Ethan didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was piling up. The more he resisted, the more aggressive the HOA became. It wasn't just about his pool anymore, it was about control. And they weren't going to stop until he either gave in or fought back. So Ethan decided to fight. He spent the next evening digging through every document he had received when purchasing the house. Somewhere in these papers was the proof that his home was legally exempt from HOA rules. If they wanted a battle, he was going to arm himself with facts and law. But just as he was about to call his lawyer, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the Rusty Anchor. You need to know what you're dealing with, ***. Ethan stared at the message, debating whether this was a trap. But curiosity won out. He recognized the bar's name. It was a small, run-down place on the edge of town. If someone had information, he needed to hear it. That night, Ethan walked into the dimly lit bar and immediately spotted a woman sitting alone in a dark corner booth. She was swirling a glass of whiskey, her expression sharp and calculating. As he approached, she smirked. "You must be Ethan," she said, motioning for him to sit. She introduced herself as Samantha Caldwell, an ex-lawyer who had once fought the very same HOA, and lost everything. Ethan's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, lost everything?" Sam leaned in, lowering her voice. "They don't just bend the rules. They rewrite them." Ethan listened as she detailed how the HOA manipulated city officials, forged documents, and used intimidation to control homeowners. Then, she slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of fraudulent contracts, fake amendments to HOA bylaws, and worst of all, a document with his own forged signature. A contract agreeing to rejoin the HOA. A contract he had never signed. Ethan felt his stomach drop. The HOA wasn't just bending the law. They were committing outright fraud. And if they were willing to forge legal documents to get what they wanted, there was no telling how far they would go. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the document in front of him. His name was there, clear as day, scrawled in black ink at the bottom of a contract that he had never seen before, much less signed. The paper stated, in legally binding language, that he had willingly opted back into the HOA, agreeing to abide by its rules, including the demolition of his pool. His stomach twisted. This is fake," he said, his voice low with barely contained fury. "Of course, it's fake," Samantha Caldwell replied, sipping her whiskey like this was just another Tuesday night. "But fake doesn't matter when the city believes it's real." Ethan clenched his fists. "How the hell are they getting away with this?" Sam leaned back, crossing her arms. "Because they've been doing it for years. You're not the first homeowner they've pulled this on, and unless we stop them, you won't be the last." She tapped the folder, her voice turning sharp. "Gerald Whitmore and his HOA aren't just a bunch of entitled suburbanites enforcing ridiculous rules. They're running a full-blown racket. They have people inside City Hall, contractors who look the other way, and even law enforcement officers who won't lift a finger against them. If they want a house under their control, they'll forge the paperwork, fabricate complaints, and push the homeowner until they either submit or leave." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "And no one's done anything?" Sam scoffed. "People have tried. A few years back, a guy named Daniel Price sued them after they pulled the same stunt with his property. He had evidence, just like you do now. But right before the case went to court, his house mysteriously caught fire. The official report called it an accident. HOA called it unfortunate." Ethan felt a chill creep down his spine. "You're saying—" "I'm saying if you don't play this smart, they're going to ruin you," Sam said bluntly. "You're already in their crosshairs. The fines, the water shut off, the intimidation. That was just the beginning." Ethan exhaled slowly, his mind racing. If they had the power to forge his signature and manipulate the city government, then what else were they capable of? The answer came sooner than he expected. The next morning, he stepped outside to find his car missing from his driveway. For a brief moment, panic surged through him. Had it been stolen? But then he spotted a bright orange sticker plastered on his mailbox. "Towed for violation of HOA parking regulations." Ethan's blood boiled. He wasn't even in the HOA. How could he violate their parking rules? He stormed to the impound lot, where an indifferent employee handed him a bill. $500 to get it back, the guy said. Ethan gritted his teeth. "This is theft." The guy shrugged. "Take it up with the HOA." By the time he returned home, seething from the blatant abuse of power, he found his mailbox ripped out of the ground. Letters, bills, and notices were scattered across his front yard, including his security camera footage USB drive. He rushed inside to check his surveillance system, ***, only to find that the last 24 hours had been wiped, ***. His heart pounded. They were erasing evidence. They knew he was fighting back, ***. Then his phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. He hesitated for a second before answering. A distorted voice crackled through the line. "You don't belong here, Walker. Drain the pool. Sign the papers. Or things will get worse." Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. Who the hell is this? The call disconnected. Before he could process what had just happened, he heard it, ***, a faint splash from his backyard, ***. His breath caught in his throat. Someone was out there. Grabbing a flashlight, he moved cautiously toward the pool. As he swung the beam of light across the water, his stomach twisted. The pool, once clear and blue, was now a sickly green, bubbling with an unnatural sheen. The stench of chemicals filled the air, ***. Someone had dumped toxic substances into it. His blood ran hot with fury. This wasn't about rules or regulations anymore. This was personal. Ethan pulled out his phone and called the police. This time, they had to take it seriously. This was vandalism, destruction of property, a direct threat to his safety. But when the officer arrived, he barely glanced at the pool before shrugging. "Sorry, sir. Without evidence of who did this, there's not much we can do." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You're looking at the evidence. Someone trespassed onto my property and poisoned my damn pool." The officer sighed, shifting uncomfortably. "Maybe you should just work something out with the HOA." Ethan's hands curled into fists. Even the police were in on it. That was the last straw. If the HOA thought they could bully him into submission, they had underestimated the wrong man. He wasn't going to play defense anymore. It was time to fight back. Ethan had spent the last few weeks reacting to fines, to harassment, to the endless psychological warfare from the HOA. But not anymore. They had poisoned his pool, towed his car, erased his security footage, and even gotten the police to turn a blind eye. They wanted to break him, to make him either bend to their will or leave, but instead of scaring him off, they had made the worst mistake possible. They made him angry. That night, he sat at his kitchen table with Samantha Caldwell and Franklin Hayes. Sam had already been drafting legal action, but Franklin had something even better, connections, "They've been running this neighborhood like a dictatorship for years," Franklin muttered, flipping through a stack of HOA violation notices he had saved from the past decade. "Most folks are too scared to fight back, but if they see someone taking a stand, they might be willing to join the cause." Ethan nodded. "Then let's give them a reason to fight. Step 1, expose their crimes." Ethan and Sam spent the next few days gathering testimonies from homeowners who had been harassed. They found dozens of cases where the HOA had issued fraudulent fines, unauthorized liens, and even threats against families who had refused to comply. One homeowner, a single mother, had been forced to pay thousands in violations for things as ridiculous as leaving her recycling bin outside an hour too long. Another had been fined for not trimming his hedges to the exact HOA standard, by half an inch. Franklin, meanwhile, rallied a small group of rebels, neighbors who were tired of being bullied but hadn't known how to fight back. They started sharing their stories on social media, creating a storm of outrage that quickly gained traction. But the real breakthrough came when Sam discovered the HOA's financial records. "There's a discrepancy in the expense reports," she told Ethan, scanning through a stack of files late one evening. "They're claiming funds were allocated for neighborhood improvements that never actually happened. Thousands of dollars in HOA fees just vanished." Ethan leaned over, his eyes narrowing. "You're saying they're embezzling money?" Sam grinned. "I'm saying if we can prove financial fraud, we can take down the entire board. Step 2, take it public." Ethan and Sam sent the financial documents to a local news station, along with the testimonies and evidence of forged contracts. Within 48 hours, an explosive whistleblower article went live, detailing how the HOA was extorting homeowners, illegally re-enrolling properties, and siphoning money into private accounts. The response was immediate. City officials, who had previously ignored complaints, were now under public pressure to launch an investigation. The HOA board, led by Gerald Whitmore, scrambled into damage control mode. Whitmore released a statement calling the accusations **baseless attacks from a disgruntled homeowner** and tried to paint Ethan as the real troublemaker. But the cracks were already showing. Step 3, deliver the final blow. The following morning, Ethan woke up to find a formal eviction notice taped to his front door. According to the document, he was in violation of HOA regulations, and they were pursuing legal action to seize his home. Ethan didn't even feel fear, just pure, unfiltered rage. He stormed into his living room, where Sam and Franklin were already preparing for the legal battle. "This is it," Ethan growled, slamming the notice onto the table. "They just declared war." Sam smirked. "Good. Because we're about to hit them where it hurts." The court case began the next day. The HOA, backed by their overpriced legal team, strutted into the courtroom, confident they would crush Ethan under legal technicalities. Gerald Whitmore took the stand first, smirking as he rattled off a scripted testimony about how Ethan was a public nuisance and a threat to the integrity of the neighborhood He waved around the forged contract showing Ethan had voluntarily rejoined the HOA. Then Sam took the floor. With absolute precision, she tore their case apart. She presented the forged contract, showing the mismatched handwriting and obvious digital manipulation. She cross-examined Gerald Whitmore, trapping him in contradictions until his smug demeanor vanished. And then came the final blow. Franklin, one of the original founders of the HOA, took the stand. "I was here when we first built this community," he said, voice firm. "And I know exactly how this HOA twisted into the corrupt mess it is today." He pulled out a secret ledger, one he had kept hidden for years. This document contains evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and illegal property takeovers. Gerald Whitmore and the current board have been stealing money from homeowners and forging legal documents to force people back into the HOA. The courtroom erupted. Gerald's face turned ghostly pale, his lawyers frantically whispered among themselves, but it was too late. The judge immediately halted all HOA actions against Ethan and ordered a full criminal investigation into the board. By the end of the week, Gerald Whitmore and several board members were arrested for fraud, harassment, and falsifying legal documents. The HOA was officially dissolved. And just like that, their tyrannical rule over the neighborhood was over. The fallout from the HOA's exposure was swift and brutal. The city launched an official investigation, uncovering years of financial fraud, forged documents, and illegal intimidation tactics. The local news station ran a follow-up story, highlighting the homeowners who had suffered under the HOA's oppressive rule. Public outrage exploded, and pressure mounted on city officials to take immediate action. Within a week, Gerald Whitmore and the entire HOA board were forced to step down. But the real victory came in court. Thanks to Sam's airtight legal case and Franklin's insider knowledge, the judge ruled that the HOA had been operating illegally for years. Not only were their fraudulent fines and liens declared void, but they were ordered to repay thousands of dollars to homeowners they had extorted. The biggest blow came when Ethan's case proved that the HOA had forged homeowner signatures to re-enroll properties under their control. With the evidence exposed, the court ruled that the HOA had no legal authority over Ethan's home, or any other home that had previously opted out. The result? The HOA was permanently dissolved. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was free. Ethan celebrated the victory the only way he knew how, by throwing a massive pool party. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to resist now laughed, splashed, and toasted to their newfound freedom. Franklin, sitting in a lounge chair, chuckled as he watched kids dive into the now crystal-clear pool. "I haven't seen this place so alive in years," he mused. Sam, sipping a drink by the edge of the pool, smirked. And no one even had to pay a pool usage fine. Ethan leaned back in his chair, finally at peace. He had won. But just as he was about to take a sip of his drink, his phone buzzed with a notification. A new email from an unfamiliar sender. Subject: New Community Management Proposal, HOA Restoration Plan. Ethan burst out laughing. They never learned. But this time, he was ready. Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below. Let's see who had it worse.